This all happened a little over 3 years ago. But some days it feels like I could reach out and touch the condensation on the window pane. The way I did that night. Time has a funny way of scrambling itself when trauma hits. It becomes both yesterday and a lifetime ago. I'd moved out here after saving up every penny from my previous job. The house wasn't much, small, plain, one story, but it was mine. That was the magic of it. It sat on a few acres of land with long, empty fields between neighbors and just a single paved road leading in and out of the hollow. If you've ever been to this corner of the country, you know what I mean. These aren't just isolated spots. They are genuinely out there. The kind of forgotten places where your cell service dies and the rest of the world stops caring. The layout was simple: 2 bedrooms, a narrow hall connecting them to the kitchen, and a living room. The best part, the reason I bought it, was the backyard. It backed right up to the forest line, a dense, dark wall of old trees that always smelled like damp earth and pine. It was early autumn, and the air had turned sharply cold. This particular night, the rain wasn't just falling, it was pounding. I loved that sound. It always felt like a giant, comforting blanket wrapped around the whole house. I was warm inside, nursing a mug of tea. The gentle hum of the refrigerator the only thing competing with the drumming rain. The evening had been mundane. I'd eaten, worked on my laptop for a bit, and then just drifted into the endless scroll of my phone. By 10 o'clock, the place was silent, bathed in the deep, inky blackness that only truly rural areas have. No streetlights, just the faint sliver of a hidden moon occasionally peeking through the storm clouds. Out here, after dark, no one moves. The sense of isolation is almost physical. It's important to understand the community rule. Even though we were a small, tight-knit group who trusted each other, everyone locked up tight after sunset. There are always whispers, local myths about things that wander out of those deep woods. And while I didn't believe in creatures, the ritual of locking every window and door offered a profound, necessary sense of security. I had done my rounds, checked everything twice, and was settled in. I remember glancing at the time. 10:40 p.m., my typical bedtime. I just closed my eyes, settling into the warmth of my duvet, when it happened. Scrape, a slow, dull scrape along the siding of the house. It wasn't the wind. The wind has a chaotic howl. This was too deliberate. It wasn't a tree branch, which would be quick and snap back. This was a long, sustained drag, something hard being pulled slowly against the exterior wall. My breath hitched. I lay perfectly still and listened, trying to normalize the sound, to rationalize it. It stopped as abruptly as it began. The rain continued its heavy rhythm, but underneath it, there was a deafening silence. After a minute, I tried to dismiss it. It had to be a deer, or maybe one of the local dogs trying to shelter from the downpour. I rolled onto my side, forcing myself to relax. Then, about 10 minutes later, a different sound. Faint, but metallic. It came from the kitchen, the opposite end of the house from my bedroom. It was the subtle, unmistakable shift of a lock or a handle being manipulated. A sound that was distinctly mechanical, distinctly human. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, frantic rhythm that drowned out the rain. This wasn't an animal. This was an invasion. I sat up, straining to listen through the rushing water outside. Another soft noise followed, like someone stepping carefully across the tile floor. My mind raced, trying to reject the truth, but the cold dread was undeniable. Someone was inside my house. I slipped out of bed, feet bare on the cool floor. I moved like a ghost, every nerve ending screaming. I crept to the bedroom door and leaned out into the hallway. It was pitch black, save for the tiny, reassuring green light of the Wi-Fi router in the living room. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. The only sounds were the persistent rain and the frantic thumping of my own pulse. Then, from the far end of the hall, near the kitchen, a slow, deliberate breath. It was real. They were here. The survival instinct kicked in, sharp and clear. I eased my bedroom door shut, making not a sound, and twisted the cheap little lock. I backed toward the window, my mind already calculating distances. My phone was still on the nightstand. I grabbed it and immediately dialed 911. My voice was a shaky whisper as I told the dispatcher what was happening. "An officer is on the way," she said, her voice calm and professional. a comforting contrast to my panic. Estimated time of arrival is 37 minutes. 37 minutes. It was an eternity. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. The steps started then, moving down the hallway toward me. Slow, careful, like whoever it was knew I was there and was enjoying the terror. They probably heard me whisper into the phone. They reached my door and stopped, right outside. I heard a faint, deliberate brushing sound, fingers against the wooden door frame. They were taking their time. They knew how isolated I was. They knew the police weren't close. My original escape plan was the woods. But the thought of fleeing into that dark, wild forest, the place where something truly terrifying had happened to me years before, made my stomach knot with an even deeper fear. I was caught between two monsters, the one inside my house and whatever the dark forest held. Then, a frantic, desperate idea. A third option. The roof of my ranch house was low. I could climb out the window, but I needed a distraction. I grabbed a heavy jacket from my closet. The rain outside was my only ally. It was coming down in sheets, a noisy, chaotic shield. I had to be fast, while the person on the other side of the door fumbled slightly. Testing the weak lock, I threw the jacket out the window. The sound of it landing on the wet earth was muffled by the storm, but it was enough to suggest an escape route. Then, I hoisted myself up, using the sill for grip. I was small, light, and running on pure adrenaline. I pulled myself onto the low, tin-covered shingles. The relief of being outside the locked room, of not falling, was immense. I lay flat, plastered to the roof, soaked instantly by the torrential rain. My heart was a drum machine going wild. I couldn't move. Any shift would make the shingles scrape and give me away. I just waited. I lay there for what felt like 10,000 years until, finally, I heard it, the distant, unmistakable wail of a police siren, cutting through the heavy rain. It turned into a chaotic scene. Police cars, lights flashing, and then my neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, peeking through their windows, or, if they were brave, coming closer to ask what was wrong. I was shivering uncontrollably, my clothes clinging to me. I could barely speak, my entire body numb from the cold and the shock. The thing that truly froze me, though, was what the officer told me when he pulled me aside. The back door was found open, he explained, his voice low. The lock wasn't damaged. Whoever came and used a key. He looked me straight in the eye, and the implication hit me like a physical blow. They believed it was a neighbor, someone who had watched me, seen I lived alone, and had, at some point, gotten a copy of my key. They weren't a stranger or a creature from the woods. They were one of the people I waved to every morning. 3 years have passed, and I still live in the same house. Nothing else has happened, but the quiet fear is always there. I have a suspicion, a gut feeling about one of my neighbors. He's always been a little too strange, a little too watchful. I avoid him, maybe unfairly, because I've never mentioned my suspicion to anyone. The community is so small, so quick to judge. It's easier for everyone to believe it was some random outsider or one of those dark forest myths. But I've taken precautions. I installed a new security system with cameras covering every angle. I replaced every single lock and reinforced the windows. I know, logically, I'm safe, but sometimes when the rain starts to fall and the lights go out, I still hear that slow, deliberate scrape on the siding, and I worry that one day I'll slip up, and the person on the other side of that door will finally finish what they started. My uncle's cabin was my sanctuary, nestled deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He'd built it himself back in the 80s, a genuine labor of love. From the front, it looked small and rustic, but it stretched out in the back, boasting wraparound porches, a low-slung tin roof that sang in the rain, and interiors lined with dark, rich cedar wood. He often let me stay there when I needed to unplug and clear my head. This trip was a mix of peace and profession. I'm a photographer, and I was looking for inspiration for a major new shoot I'd been offered. The cabin was supposed to be the perfect, quiet canvas for my mind. That night, the quiet was replaced by chaos. It had been drizzling all day, a thin mist clinging to the trees like gauze. But as the sun went down, the sky ripped open. The rain was drumming the tin roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. The cabin was designed for isolation, The closest neighbor was a mile down a steep, muddy road. Cell service was a joke. You had to stand in the driveway, phone tilted at a specific, ridiculous angle, just to catch a single bar. That was my uncle's choice. He wanted a place where the bad news and the noise of the world couldn't reach inside. It smelled like old cedar, wood smoke, and damp wool. The power had flickered twice already, a normal occurrence up here. So I had lit a few candles just in case. It was the kind of night that screamed for a blackout. Cozy, warm, and secure, while the outside world was in turmoil. The first sign that things were terribly wrong wasn't a sound. It was the dog, Penny, my uncle's mutt, a sweet, aged girl well over 18 years old. She was usually dead to the world by 9 p.m., especially when my uncle wasn't around. She'd get quiet, reserved, almost waiting patiently for his return. But that night, she was sitting bolt upright near the sliding glass door that led to the back porch. Her ears were pricked, her tail was dead still, and she wasn't making a sound. No growl, no bark, just an intense, silent stare into the pitch-black backyard. I had a childhood cat who used to do that, staring at the wall or into the darkness like he saw things we couldn't. Penny's posture gave me a genuine, instinctive shiver. It was pure, primal alert. I got up, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a deer, maybe a raccoon looking for shelter. I slid the curtain back an inch and peered out. Nothing but trees, rain, and my own distorted reflection in the wet glass. But as I reached to close the curtain, the motion-sensitive security light on the back porch clicked on. My heart seized. That light only turns on for movement. Again, it could be an animal. I tried to swallow the dread, forced myself to believe it was just a large coyote, and pulled the curtain shut. I went back to the couch, but Penny never moved. She remained locked in that terrifyingly alert position. A few minutes later, the power officially died. Clicked. Dead quiet, except for the rain hammering the roof. The candles I had lit threw dancing shadows across the wood-paneled walls, making the room feel suddenly smaller, less friendly. The darkness outside became absolute. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight and went to check the breaker box in the small hall closet. The breakers were fine. The power was simply out across the region, as expected, out of habit. I opened the back door, just a crack, to see if the battery-operated porch light was still working. It was, but the porch itself wasn't empty anymore. There were heavy boot prints pressed into the wetwood planks, leading from the bottom steps right up to the sliding glass door I had just peeked through. They were large, deep, and definitely not mine. The simple, silent sight of those prints felt like a punch to the chest. I stood there, gasping, needing several seconds just to breathe. The cold realization that whoever it was had been standing right there, watching me through the glass, was terrifying. The cabin walls were thin, just old wood, separating me and Penny from whoever was lurking in the dark. I shut the door quietly, twisted the lock, and killed the flashlight. I backed into the kitchen, desperately trying to think. The only phone, the old landline, was upstairs in the guest room. But why bother? The police would take hours, if they even sent someone on a night like this. I started up the stairs anyway, each step slow, deliberate. Penny followed right at my heels, a small, dark shape. Halfway up, I heard it. Crunch, crunch, wood cracking outside. Slow, heavy, measured footsteps on the wet gravel around the cabin's perimeter. Whoever it was, they were moving, actively searching. I finished climbing the stairs, went into the guest room, and locked the door behind Penny. She was still rigid with fear, but looking at her, old and scared, gave me a strange jolt of clarity. I wasn't just worried about what they would do to me. I had to protect her. She needed to live out her final years in peace. I moved to the bed and retrieved the shotgun my uncle kept underneath. I locked Penny in the room, told her to stay, and went back downstairs, the heavy weapon feeling both terrifying and comforting in my hands. Through the curtains, I saw the outside light click on again. He was still here. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I pulled the curtain aside, raised the shotgun, and looked. There he was, a man silhouetted in the dim light. He was holding something long and dark, a rifle. We stared at each other through the glass. To people separated by a thin pane, both holding weapons, both pointing. The man, seeing me, didn't panic. He made a strange, unreadable expression, a mix of frustration and recognition. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. I didn't lower mine. I shouted through the glass, "What do you want?" He clearly said something back, but the noise of the rain was too loud. Still holding the gun steady, I opened the window just a crack. "Where the hell is your uncle?" he demanded, his voice rough and low. "If you want to stay alive, you better answer me." His question left me totally perplexed. "He's not home," I managed to say. "He's not here." The man gave me another long, hard look. Then everything happened too fast for my mind to process. He raised his rifle and fired. Not at me, but at the top of the glass door. The entire panel shattered violently. Glass shrapnel rained down, and with the deafening noise, I instinctively threw myself to the floor, covering my head. I couldn't tell if I'd been shot or just hit by glass. I looked up. He was already inside the cabin, stepping over the broken frame. I thought I was going to die right there, but he didn't shoot me. He simply walked over, punched me hard in the stomach. The air instantly left my lungs and violently ripped the shotgun from my hands. Then he started running through the cabin, throwing open doors, searching. He found the guest room where Penny was locked. I scrambled up, pleading, "Please, don't hurt her." He turned back until he was standing over me again. He looked down, his eyes hard. "Tell your uncle I'll be back," he said, the finality chilling me to the bone. Then, just as abruptly as he came in, he left, stepping back out through the shattered window. As soon as I could breathe, I grabbed Penny, put her in the car, and drove straight back to town to file a report. The police came with me, took my statement, and made a sketch of the man I described. I don't know what my uncle did or who this man was. He never told me anything, but when the police showed him the sketch, I saw a flicker of pure terror and recognition in his eyes. He simply apologized to me, profoundly, and said, "The cabin has to stay empty for a while. It's too dangerous now. It's been 7 years. He still hasn't told me a thing." Penny passed away peacefully in his other house a few years later. He never went back to that cabin again, at least not that I know of. The silence of the mountains was broken, and the sanctuary was lost forever.